Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds, decoding the core mechanics of the cardiovascular system. We're not just listing parts. We want to understand how the heart's output, cardiac output, or COO, and the blood returning, venous return, or VR, find this, well, incredible dynamic balance.
Yeah, it's a constant negotiation.
We've got some foundational sources here. Guidance curves, PV loops, basic physics, focusing on how things like blood volume, pressure, heart health, all interact, basically second by second.
Exactly. And the mission for you listening is rapid mastery. We'll use these sources, focusing on those KOVR curves and the pressure volume loops, to really let you predict how losing blood or high blood pressure or, say, a change in heart strength affects the whole system.
Okay.
By the end, hopefully, these dynamics will feel much more intuitive.
Right. Let's start big picture then, the macro view. Guidance analysis, that KOVR graph. So imagine this graph. Y-axis is flow, liters per minute. And that's both CO and VR. They have to match up.
They have to match, yeah.
And the x-axis. This is atrial pressure, REP, which is basically your central venous pressure, CVP.
Exactly. And the magic really is where those two curves cross.
The equilibrium point.
That's the only place the system is stable. It's where cardiac output perfectly equals venous return. That point sets your steady state output and your central pressure. Change anything, and the system immediately hunts for a new crocking point.
Okay, let's take the heart's curve first. The cardiac output curve, it slopes up, which makes sense, right? More filling pressure in the right atrium stretches the heart. Frank-Starling kicks in, it pumps more.
Right. Higher CVP means more stretch, means more output. Up to a point, of course.
Ah, right. So why does it plateau? Why doesn't more filling always mean more output indefinitely?
Well, Frank-Starling isn't infinite. Those muscle fibers, the sarcomeres, they have an optimal stretch. Go beyond that, and putting more volume in doesn't help. In fact, it can even decrease output eventually and lead to congestion.
Okay, so before that plateau, what shifts the whole curve?
That tells you about the heart's intrinsic function. Increase contractility, think exercise or certain drugs, and the whole CO curve shifts up and left, meaning the heart pumps more blood at any given filling pressure. It's just, well, more efficient.
And the opposite, if the heart muscle is weaker or struggling against high resistance?
Exactly. Decreased contractility, like from a heart attack or a big spike in afterload, the pressure it pumps against shifts the curve down and right.
Less efficient.
Yeah.
Needs higher filling pressure just to maintain output.
Precisely.
Now the other curve, venous return. This one can be a bit tricky. It slopes down. Why does increasing the pressure in the right atrium reduce the blood coming back? Seems counterintuitive.
It does at first glance, but it's all about the pressure gradient driving flow back to the heart.
Okay.
Blood flows from high pressure in the peripheral veins to low pressure in the right atrium. If that right atrial pressure starts climbing, the pressure difference shrinks.
Ah, so the gradient gets smaller, less driving force.
Exactly. Less gradient, less flow. That's why the VR curve slopes down as right atrial pressure goes up.
So what shifts this curve? Is it the heart pumping harder?
No, and this is absolutely critical. The VR curve is pretty much independent of the heart's contractility.
Really?
Yeah, it's governed by the systemic circulation, primarily blood volume and venous tone, how constricted the veins are.
So like a transfusion?
Right. Increase blood volume or crank up sympathetic tone, which constricts veins, and you shift the VR curve right and up. More volume or tighter pipes means more pressure, pushing blood back.
And if you lose volume, like in hemorrhage?
Curve shifts left and down, less pressure driving return, same if venous tone drops, like with spinal anesthesia.
Okay, and you mentioned a high yield point about the VR curve's x-intercept.
Yes. The mean systemic filling pressure, or MSFP, that's where the VR curve hits the x-axis, meaning zero flow.
What does it represent physically?
It's the theoretical pressure everywhere in the circulation if you could just instantly stop the heart. It purely reflects the amount of fill in the system, the effective circulating volume, and the background venous tone.
And why is that so high yield?
Because it depends only on the vascular system volume and tone, not on the heart's contractility. It separates the pipes from the pump.
Okay, now let's put it together. Clinical vignettes, example 1, intense exercise. What happens to both curves?
Okay, exercise ramps everything up. Contractility increases, so the CO curve shifts up and left.
Stronger pump.
Right. And simultaneously, sympathetic drive increases venous tone, squeezing blood back to the heart. So the VR curve shifts right and up.
Okay, so both curves move up in a sense.
Exactly. The new equilibrium point. Way higher on the y-axis. Cardiac output absolutely skyrockets.
But what about the pressure, the RAP?
Interestingly, because both pump efficiency and return are boosted, the right atrial pressure often stays near normal or might even decrease slightly. The system gets much more flow without a big pressure backup.
Wow. Okay, contrast that starkly with scenario 2. Severe hemorrhage. Massive blood loss.
Total opposite. Losing volume crashes, the VR curve shifts it way left and down.
Less return pressure.
Right. And the heart, now starved for preload, also pumps less effectively, even if contractility itself isn't directly damaged initially. So the CO curve shifts down too.
So the new intersection point
Is way down and to the left. You get a catastrophic drop in both cardiac output and right atrial pressure. Understanding these two scenarios, exercise and hemorrhage, using the curves, really helps cement how the whole system regulates itself.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift focus from the whole system down to the heart's own performance report card. Ejection fraction, EF.
Right. EF, E full stroke volume divided by N diastolic volume. Simple ratio.
How much you filled versus how much you pumped out. Normal is, what, 55, 70%?
Around there, yeah. It's our main measure of systolic function, how well the ventricle squeezes.
And what determines it? Preload matters because of Frank Starling, right?
Preload sets the stage via Frank Starling, yes, but EF is most sensitive to changes in afterload and contractility.
Why those two specifically?
Because they directly determine how much blood is left behind after the squeeze the end systolic volume, or ESV.
Ah, the residue. So let's say someone has chronic, really bad high blood pressure, high afterload. What happens to that ESV?
That high pressure is like pushing against a brick wall. The ventricle struggles to eject blood, so more gets left behind. ESV goes up.
And if ESV goes up, the fraction ejected EF must go down.
Instantly drops the EF. Conversely, boost contractility, give a drug like dobutamine, the heart squeezes harder, empties more completely.
ESV goes down.
ESV goes down, and EF jumps up.
This leads right into the two main flavors of heart failure. First, systolic dysfunction. HFREF heart failure with reduced EF.
Yeah, HFREF is basically a weak pump problem. The contractility itself is shot.
So the ventricle often dilates, gets bigger.
Right, you get a large end diastolic volume, the chamber stretches out, but the squeeze is poor, so the EF tanks often below 40%. Too much blood is left behind, that's the core issue. High ESV.
Okay, then there's the other kind, diastolic dysfunction. HFpEF heart failure with preserved EF. These people can have terrible congestion symptoms, but their EF might be like 60% perfectly normal. What gives?
The squeeze is fine, the EF looks good on paper. The problem is filling.
Filling? How?
The ventricle wall has become stiff, non-compliant, think thick, rigid muscle. It can't relax and stretch properly during diastole, the filling phase.
So it just can't accept enough blood easily.
Exactly. So even though it ejects a normal percentage, the EF, the actual volume it managed to fill with the EDV is low, and worse, the pressure needed to force even that small amount of blood into the stiff chamber is really high.
And that high filling pressure backs up into the lungs, causing the congestion symptoms.
Precisely. Low compliance is the enemy in HFpEF.
Let's connect this to physics. Wall stress and oxygen demand. Laplace's law. Can we skip the formula and get to the concept?
Absolutely. The key idea. Wall tension, the stress on the heart muscle fibers, is proportional to the pressure inside the chamber times the radius of the chamber. And it's inversely proportional to the wall thickness.
So bigger chamber radius, higher tension. Higher pressure, higher tension.
Exactly. Tension is the enemy because it dictates how much oxygen the heart muscle needs. MVO2, myocardial oxygen consumption.
So if a ventricle dilates, gets a bigger radius, like in some types of heart failure,
the wall tension required to generate the same pressure goes way up. Huge oxygen cost. Same if it has to fight chronic high pressure.
Okay, so how does the heart defend itself against that crippling tension from chronic high pressure, like hypertension?
Its only real defense is to change the geometry. It undergoes concentric hypertrophy.
Thickens the wall.
Right. It increases the wall thickness in the relationship. By beefing up the wall, it directly reduces the wall tension needed to handle that high pressure.
It normalizes the stress on the individual muscle fibers.
Exactly. It reduces the oxygen demand, which is initially protective. It's an adaptation to survive the high pressure load.
But you hinted earlier, this fix creates its own problem.
Yeah.
This hypertrophy is a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. It solves the immediate tension problem, reduces the oxygen cost. But that thick, muscular wall is inherently stiff.
Less compliant.
Much less compliant. Can't relax and fill easily. So the very adaptation that saves it from pressure overload sets the stage for diastolic dysfunction, difficulty filling, high filling pressures.
It trades one problem for another, potentially.
In the long run, yes, often.
Okay, let's visualize all this with the ultimate heartbeat map. The pressure-volume loop. Left ventricle, specifically.
Great tool. X-axis is volume, Y-axis is pressure, and the loop runs counterclockwise through the cardiac cycle.
4 phases, right? Starts bottom right.
Usually start thinking about it when the mitral valve closes. Phase 1, isovolumetric contraction. Pressure shoots up, but volume is constant because both valves are closed. That's S1, the first heart sound. Phase 2, ejection. Aortic valve opens once LV pressure exceeds aortic pressure, and volume plummets as blood is ejected.
Top of the loop.
Yep. Then phase 3, isovolumetric relaxation. Aortic valve snaps shut, S2 sound. Pressure falls rapidly, volume stays constant again.
And finally,
phase 4, filling. Mitral valve opens when LV pressure drops below atrial pressure, and the ventricle fills, volume increases, moving us back to the start.
And visually, the width of that loop tells you.
Stroke volume, how much blood was actually ejected.
And the rightmost point.
And diastolic volume, that's your preload.
And the leftmost point.
And systolic volume reflects afterload and contractility. How much was left behind?
Okay, let's play with the shape. What if we give IV fluids increased preload?
The loop stretches to the right, EDV increases. Because of Frank Starling, SV usually increases too, so the loop gets wider.
Makes sense. What about increased afterload? Severe hypertension.
The loop gets taller, has to generate much higher pressure to open the aortic valve, and critically, it gets narrower.
Narrower? Why?
Because against that high resistance, it can't eject as much blood. Stroke volume decreases and more blood is left behind, so ESV increases, shifts left boundary to the right. Taller and narrower.
Got it. And if we boost contractility?
Yeah.
W mean again.
The loop shifts up and powerfully to the left. Higher peak pressure reflecting stronger squeeze. And the left boundary shifts way left because the heart empties much more effectively lower ESV.
So the loop gets wider, especially at the top. Bigger stroke volume, higher EF.
Exactly. Big increase in SV and EF.
Now let's zoom in on one phase you mentioned, isovolumetric contraction. It seems paradoxical no blood is moving out, yet you said oxygen demand peaks here. Why?
Because this is where wall tension is arguably highest. Remember Laplace. Pressure is rapidly rising and the radius is still at its maximum, EDV. The heart muscle is generating massive force, but the fibers aren't shortening yet. It's isometric work.
Like trying to lift something too heavy to move.
Kind of, yeah. And isometric muscle contraction is metabolically very, very expensive. That's why oxygen demand spikes.
So for someone with uncontrolled hypertension, that high systemic pressure makes this IVC phase even worse.
Absolutely critical point. The LV has to generate even higher pressure just to crack open the aortic valve. This prolongs the isovolumetric contraction phase.
More time spent at that peak tension.
Exactly. More time under maximum stress, dramatically increasing oxygen demand. This is why severe hypertension or aortic stenosis can cause angina chest pain from ischemia, even if the coronary arteries themselves are perfectly fine. The demand just outstrips supply during IBC.
Okay, what about the other closed valve phase? Isovolumetric relaxation. Pressure dropping before filling. You mentioned lusitropy active relaxation. I thought relaxing was passive.
Not entirely. Getting the muscle fibers to actually release their contraction and lengthen requires energy. Specifically, pumping calcium ions back into storage within the cell. That active process is lusitropy.
So relaxation costs energy too.
It does. And if that process is impaired often by ischemia, lack of ATP, or just the stiffness from hypertrophy, the pressure doesn't fall as quickly.
So IVR gets prolonged.
Yes. And that delayed pressure drop directly eats into the time available for filling, contributing significantly to diastolic dysfunction. Impaired relaxation is a big part of HFpEF.
Okay, last piece, tying back to the filling phase on the PV loop. We can see different reasons for poor filling. Hemorrhage, low preload.
Right. In hemorrhage, the whole loop shifts left because there's less volume coming back. Both EDV and pressure at the end of filling, the LV-EDP, are low or normal. Less blood, less pressure.
But compare that to the stiff ventricle reduced compliance from hypertrophy.
Here's the key difference. The loop still shifts left because the total filled volume, EDV, is reduced. It couldn't stretch to accept more.
But the pressure?
The filling part of the loop becomes very steep and shifted upward. Even though the volume EDV is low, the pressure needed to force that volume in LV-EDPB is significantly elevated because the wall is so stiff.
That's the signature. Low volume, high pressure.
Exactly. That high LVEDP is what causes the pulmonary congestion, even without volume overload per se.
This has been, well, a genuinely deep dive into the heart's mechanics. We've moved past just terms into how these forces really interact.
I hope so. We've seen how Guyton's Key-OVR balance, Laplace's rules for tension, Frank Starling, they're not separate ideas. They're all part of one integrated system.
Right.
And if you can visualize that PV loop changing shape and understand how the CO and VR curves find their balance, you really can start to predict how drugs, disease, exercise, how almost anything will affect the whole cardiovascular picture.
So a final thought for you to chew on directly from this material. We saw how the heart adapts to chronic high pressure by thickening its walls concentric hypertrophy. It is a smart move, short-term, reduces wall tension, saves oxygen.
Seems adaptive.
But why does that very adaptation, that life-saving thickening, so often lead down the road to diastolic heart failure? Consider the trade-off. Gaining thickness solves the tension problem, but what does it cost?
It costs compliance.
Exactly. It costs the ability to relax and fill easily, trapping the heart in a state of high pressure even when volume isn't the main issue. A defense mechanism becomes its own kind of pathology, something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.